Hey everybody, you're listening to and watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
And I'm Steve Morey.
And we are your hairy heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy heavy homo even to listen in. Oh, a homo.
A homo.
Well, in my defense, I just had in the background for part of the day the new 3 Mile Island documentary that's on Netflix, and there's some very specific accents that are between people who were transplanted to that area of Pennsylvania and some of the native people there. So I think that may be where that comes from. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. We're here with you tonight. I would like everybody who is listening or watching at some point to congratulate Caleb on finishing law school. He had his final exams. He's not with us tonight. He's out celebrating with Doctor Strange, some movie or something. So that's where he is tonight. And Brian has some other commitments. We'll see Brian, at some point before 2023. I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah, he's a busy gentleman. Very busy gentleman. And of course, we're not going to begrudge Caleb for getting to see the big MCU movie that's coming out this month. Yeah. So do you have plans already to go see it?
No, I am not taking chances with my health in a crowded movie theater.
Yeah.
If it was a situation where you had to show proof of vax and people were masked up, I'd be relatively okay with it. I am going to concerts again, but going to a concert is a little bit different than going to a movie theater, I think. Because the concerts I'm seeing are tend to be like-minded people, and I know that's kind of naive a bit, but
Well, I mean, yeah.
And I still mask up everywhere. I'm not taking that thing off. Some of y'all are nasty, so.
You're nasty anyway. COVID be damned. I mean, you guys are all plague carriers. So while I and my husband Jason were planning on seeing it on Sunday, a friend of mine, called me up about it and was like, "Hey, let's go see it." So I've been watching, the different showings to see which ones are most open. And actually, shockingly, the early morning, the before lunchtime ones are still really, sparsely filled. Obviously, when you get into the afternoon on Sunday, post-church, basically, it's pretty packed. So, we'll see. Shockingly, or maybe not shockingly, the 3D showing, the earliest 3D showing is has the least tickets sold for it, which is very interesting. But yeah, I mean, I have a local AMC that's not one of the main ones. There's the big one that everybody goes to, several big ones around Charlotte. So those screenings have all been sold out for weeks. So I'm happy I kind of live a little bit. That's one of the good things about living a little bit further away from the big cities. Here in NC, so.
The big AMC by us closed during the early stages of the pandemic and has not reopened. It's not going to reopen. I think AMC actually sold the land. And I know Mike Lovins had a similar situation, the one that was closest to him, which was a 24-plex. It was the exact same setup. We still have an AMC presence, but it's not like it was.
It's not the big fancy one with the IMAX or the Dolby screens or whatever it is.
Well, they've upgraded since. And, we have Regals that are like that. If you want to drive a bit, we have AMC. The closest theater to me does not have IMAX, but, sometimes, I've been burned on IMAX sometimes.
I saw Dune in IMAX.
That last Harry Potter movie.
So I saw Dune on IMAX. It was absolutely gorgeous. The seats were so uncomfortable because they did not lean back. I can't believe I've been so spoiled for the past at this point 10 years with theaters that have replaced all their seats, getting those circus style plush covered ones that just kind of sit you like this. Yeah, not so much fun anymore. We do have David Toby's joined us. Hello,
Hey,
David.
David.
He's mentioned, hey, I'm surprised you do not have a fifth alternate by now. Not that you need one. Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of friends of the show who have joined us in previous episodes. We had Chris Cummins the other week joining us,
and we've had David in the seat too.
We've had David here as well. Yeah, I mean,
you have to understand some of these other guys. It's like dealing with two other people. So we did have 5 hosts at one time.
We did.
And it was
all 5 of us at once.
Yeah. It was a little hard sometimes when we had to wrangle everybody. Well, wrangling 5 people up together was a challenge at points. But also when we had people on the show and making sure everybody had their time. Yeah. I like 3 or 4,
It works. It's good. And then sometimes just the 2 of us, Bill.
Yeah, sometimes it's just the 2 of us, like nice. Tonight. And we're going to be talking about one book in particular tonight. And if you see me shirt here, it may give you a clue about what we're talking about. We have some other things to talk about. We've had some developments in comic-related news. One particularly sad passing, cancellations of comic-related media programs. So we do have plenty to talk about, even though we are basically zeroing on one particular book. Much like we did when I Never Promised You a Rose Garden knocked her socks off.
Oh yeah,
that was that was a nice spotlight, and this is probably going to be a similar situation. But when we do these shows, these Comic Book Bear podcast live stream episodes, one thing that we have been doing is we're showing off our geek gets, things that we've gotten in the last 2 weeks. And Steve, who normally is the one that's like, I didn't go out, and then, for some reason he doesn't know that there's something called Amazon or anything, that he's always left out, doesn't do anything. But you actually have one tonight, so why don't you show us?
I do. And everybody knows that the best thing on a podcast is show and tell. But at least for the people who are watching live, you will get to see all of our geek gets, which is wonderful. Or you can watch us on YouTube later and see what we actually got. So one of the cool things that Bill and I both tend to pay attention to is Disney Insiders. Disney Insiders, it's sort of like a one of those sort of rewards programs that reward you for buying Disney movies, watching Disney movies, all sorts of stuff like that. So you get a bunch of points, and then on Wednesdays they tend to have like a little special kind of reward thing that you can grab. And some of them are really limited editions. Some of them are just interesting sort of items, pins, posters, things like that. But then also sometimes exclusive Funko Pops, which is one of what I got this time, which was a Hawkeye from the recent MCU TV series on Disney Plus. It is the Hawkeye version. Which is actually pretty cool. So I was pretty excited to see that they had that up. In the past, we've had other Funko Pops that have popped up. Star Wars, some of the Disney, the recent Disney and Pixar movies have had some, single ones.
I got a Gilgamesh pop.
Yeah, that's right. You got the Gilgamesh recently.
And just apart from the Wednesdays, they do also have a points program that's always in position. And I've gotten a number of Blu-rays through that mechanism.
Yeah, you can get some good deals on that stuff too.
It's great to fill in the gaps sometimes. And sometimes they're great. I don't understand Disney people with pins.
The
pins are like, they go like that. It's they'll have like a vinyl pop, and sometimes they actually have like 2 Blu-rays for 400 points. They haven't had that in a while, but for some reason, these pins just like people go crazy for them. They just immediately sell out. I don't understand it. I don't understand.
This week was a specialty Funko version R2D2 pin. It went live at 9:00, and I think at 9:02 it was gone.
It was gone. Yeah, and it's usually not that fast.
Yeah. But pins, man, pins.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Anyway, on to the other comics I've been buying. No,
Okay, so
all these other things that we collect.
I did stop at a toy show.
Mm.
I got a bunch of stuff in the last 2 weeks, but I'm not going to be showing off too much of it, just in the interest of time.
But
one thing
cool
I
stuff.
did get at a toy show, and I figured you have to do something since yesterday was the 4th of May, and May the 4th be with you. I did get the Star Wars storybook from 1978 from
Oh,
Scholastic
geez.
Book Services. And it basically retells the story of the first film. The first film. There's no such thing as A New Hope. In a book that I would think would be like a preteen reader probably, and pre-video tape in the home. That's the kind of stuff we had for some reason. And I was a Star Wars. I got everything I could. I don't even remember this book, and maybe because it was a '78 copyright, that maybe some of the mania for me had died down, and also by '78 there was a lot of stuff. '77 there wasn't, because licensing was weird at the time. So that's one thing I got. This is, and I just love the packaging on this. This is the second one I've got. These are the Funko comic cover sets. I ordered this from Amazon July 22nd of last year. And this was a situation where this was one of those pallets that was stuck in customs overseas. And they were giving us updates like, yes, this product does exist. We're still waiting for it to come over, but I finally got it, and I have an Action Comics one. Oh, a little light there. Sorry about that. I have one that's based on Action Comics #1. They are coming out with 2 other DC ones, but they're much more recent vintage for Green Lantern and Wonder Woman. And Marvel people aren't being shut out either. There are Target exclusives for Vision and Wanda from classic covers of theirs. So
cool.
if you like this set, this is the kind of Funko, like, there's no way this is coming out of the box. It's just beautiful like this.
It's for display only.
And the home video maven that I did get delivered to my door the Constantine House of Mystery set of shorts from the DC animated movie series, and has shorts based on Commandy, The Losers, and Blue Beetle, along with Constantine and this particular iteration of Justice League Dark. Haven't watched this yet. We'll get to it at some point soon. And last week was, it's not just comics that I celebrate. It was Record Store Day. So I did get a bunch of things. I didn't go on Record Store Day because, again, I don't trust y'all. And the particular store that's very close to me, Princeton Record Exchange, is really small. And there'd be no way I would be comfortable going there. Plus, the line is nuts. I mean, if you get there at 7, maybe you'll have a 4-hour wait. I mean, people are crazy with this Record Store Day stuff in certain areas. They just really are. So I was able to go the next day, and I got 2 things. I got Ultravox Live at the Rainbow 1977 vinyl album, and this is the version of Ultravox before Midjour joined, when they were led by John Fox. And almost nobody who's watching this will know what I'm talking about. And then I got
Let me get Jason up here.
A 12-inch reissue of A Celebration by U2. A Celebration was a bit of it's kind of a weird bit of U2's history. It was a non-album single that was released between October and War. Never appeared on a studio album, and has some additional tracks, but this is their version of the reissue. And then my favorite one, this is so awesome, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Altered Reels. I was a massive Frankie fan. I mean, like, there is a picture of me in my high school yearbook with the Frankie say, I think it's War Hide Yourself. I had Frankie say War Hide Yourself, Frankie say Relax, Don't Do It. That was a big one. Frankie say Arm the Unemployed. There was one with Ronald Reagan with a bullet in his head that said Only Frankie Can Stop Me Now. Frankie Will Give You the Action. I had, as many as I could get. I just would, for about a year, Frankie were my favorite band. And because they were like one of those situations where they were more than a band because of the controversies and the graphics of the single releases and the videos and all that shit. So this is a compilation known as Frankie Goes to Hollywood Altered Reels. When they released their first two singles, Relax and Two Tribes, this was kind of the infancy of the cassette single. And they actually did things with the cassette single. There were different mixes. There was all kinds of, interpolated noises into them. They really played with the format. And these particular mixes were never issued on vinyl until now. So that was my record store day haul.
Interesting.
Yeah. So not just comics, folks.
Well, Frankie also says, what happened this past couple of weeks in comic news? And yes, we've got the really bad news. Let's leave that for the end.
Okay.
We've got some sort of bad news, especially
bad
for
news
people who are fans. I'm not even talking about Netflix. To be honest, shitting the bed in fear once their stock started going down. They've lost subscribers. They're like, let's cut everything. And unfortunately, Jeff Smith's Bone, after 10 years in development hell and multiple different studios and services and streamers and everybody and their brother being interested in this thing, Netflix, who was the best chance for it to get made up to this point, decided to just say, like, you know what, we can't do this now. We're just, we gotta lay people off, cut our losses and run. And that was one of the things that was cut, and Jeff Smith was absolutely justifiably unhappy about it because of all the frustrations up to this point. So he's like, screw this, I'm done. We're just not going to make this. Maybe another 10 years, maybe another 20 years, maybe somebody will revisit it. I think right now he's just like, no. Please give me back my rights.
Yeah. It's amazing how many comic-related projects end up in development hell. Apparently, the script that was provided for We 3 is amazing and has never found a home. Sandman has had a lot of close calls.
And yes, it exists, and it's been filmed, and it's almost here.
Yeah.
So it exists.
There was a Vertigo property, Midnight Mass, not related to the Netflix series. And apparently that had 3 very close calls of being greenlit. It's just strange. It seems comic properties just seem to fall into hell a little more regularity than some others, it seems.
And we've had some that have made it, and Netflix especially has been, very instrumental in that, and Hulu, to some extent as well, with Hitmonkey and the recent Y the Last Man. Even though that only lasted 1 season, but there were other reasons for it ending and being canceled. Netflix still has coming out, and they did put it on their reel for what's coming out this year, Dead India by Hamish Steele. Like I'm really looking forward to that. You've also got the Usagi Yojimbo cartoon series is on its way. And I think a couple other ones too that are still, that are still coming out, that are going to see the light of day. We'll see. Hopefully they get more than 1 season. At this point, I think Netflix is going to be kind of cutting back on a lot. So that's unfortunate if you've been really looking forward to some stuff possibly becoming Netflix series, or with other streamers as well.
Yeah, well, I think Netflix's big problem is they don't have a library. I think that does become an issue when you do have situations like Peacock and whatever is going to end up as the successor to HBO Max, and Disney
Yeah.
Plus and Paramount Plus is, a lot of their streaming is from classic television. A
Well,
lot of it,
that's true,
you know.
but they also have a ton a
Yeah.
ton of original content that they've been making over the past 10 years. A ton of it. And in fact, at one point, it almost seemed like, for every classic series that they were, losing to some of the other services, they were, like, putting out another 15 or 20. Netflix's biggest problem, and everybody's been complaining about this for a very long time, is that they have a very bad way of marketing those mid-level shows. Where, like, yes, you've got the big marquee properties that they're pushing out because they know that everybody's going to be watching. The Umbrella Academy, shockingly, the Umbrella Academies. Of course, the Stranger Things. Some of the other Ozark. Some of these properties that they know are going to be hits or have already shown that they are hits. But for every one of those, there's, like, I don't know, a dozen other series that also release around the same time that get very little attention, even on their own app, which is kind of...
It also feels that it's almost kind of a haphazard collection of things. You'll have, like, number 2 and 3 of a film series, but not number 1. And I think that was just
the streaming. Nobody knew how
these major conglomerates are going to get into this particular business.
Exactly. Nobody knew what was going to happen for streaming for whatever. Like, a lot of those studios early on were either just like, everybody gets the right to show this. They thought of it very much like, pay cable, like the HBOs, the Showtimes, the movie channels of all of the past. But it's not like that, and it could be monetized a lot better. Which is
I
why
still have a DVD component to my Netflix membership. I still get.
Oh, do you?
Well, there's a lot of stuff.
I mean, they still have it.
Never, ever going to be on streaming. Ever.
Never going to be on streaming, and has yet to be on Blu-ray either. There's a lot of stuff that's still only available on DVD.
So I just got the Magilla Gorilla show on DVD. How else was I going to get that without buying it?
Exactly.
And I know
Netflix.
So go ahead.
Netflix wasn't the only one that had some pretty, hard-hitting cancellations for us comic book nerds.
Well,
what other major? Series?
It looks like we have the Arrowverse cut in half now, in terms of the shows that are, firmly set in it. I think, as people were saying, things like Naomi and Stargirl are adjacent. But in terms of the
because they clearly take place in other worlds.
In terms of the core Arrowverse shows, we did have confirmation that neither Batwoman nor Legends of Tomorrow are continuing. I think it's a little harder hitting for me and for the show of Legends of Tomorrow because they left it on a cliffhanger. And the chief showrunner, she did have an interview. She said, "Look, I gambled and lost. I threw the dice and what was their end count? 6 seasons or 7?
7 seasons.
7 seasons. Jesus. So a very healthy run. A very healthy run. Luckily, with the kind of apparatus that DC Comics has, we may see the finale at some point in some form, if either in comic book form or as part of the Flash, as has been bandied about. Batwoman was a much more satisfying ending, I think, because they did play it like if it's a series finale, that'll work. Each of the major characters has a coda. There's an end to a part of their story, so I don't think Batwoman is as stinging a loss when you factor in everything as Legends of Tomorrow is. And I'm gonna miss it because Legends of Tomorrow was, once they found their footing and they knew that they could not be serious. Then the show worked wonderfully. The first season's like schizophrenic. They don't know where to go. They don't know who's going to be the breakout character. Everybody has their kind of moment, and I would say, like, very early on in season 2 they started getting a groove, and let the silliness come in. And I'm just gonna miss it. I'm really gonna miss those characters, because that was it wasn't necessarily my favorite, but it was the one I often looked forward to the most, because I knew I was gonna have the most fun watching it.
Oh yeah, I mean, every week you're like, okay, what ridiculousness are they going to have this time? And I think I watched it religiously the first couple of seasons, and I think I really understood, and just as much as they understood, what the show was going to be at I want to say it may have been the 3rd season finale, where they all combined their powers and became a giant Bebo to fight Maltus, I think it was. I want to say it was Maltus, kind of like that evil winged demon, whatever. And it's a giant Bebo. And I like that was like, this is what the series is about. It is about a bunch of crazy misfit DC characters that don't really fit into a serious show, doing everything wild and crazy. And I mean, we see how well that works for James Gunn's Suicide Squad or Peacemaker at a more adult level, whereas Legends was very accessible, I think, for more, all ages.
Yeah.
Older kids.
Like the network is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly. It really worked for everybody. And we know that formula is very successul for.
And out of all the shows, it never fell into those stupid CW-isms, which The Flash still does. I thought you were my friend.
I've got a secret, but I can't tell you until you find out. Because tell me I betrayed you.
Yeah. And just a ridiculous amount of people in the hospital or in the infirmary. Oh boy! I mean, go back to Smallville. I would shudder to think of the rooms that are dedicated to the Kent family at Smallville Memorial Hospital.
Oh my god!
It would be like nuts. Oh man!
And yeah. I mean, hey, they learned that formula well, so.
I know you're not up on shows, but in terms of a different kind of loss, we did have a major Flash character leave us last night. So once you get caught up, we can talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. So people who've been watching Flash will clearly know what was going on, but yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, and so all of that sort of like bad news from like a geek fan,
but it's not all bad on the TV front. I know Moon Knight was very disappointing for a lot of people, but we did have the finale that was released yesterday. So it's another show that you can watch. Young Justice is amazing. I just love what they are doing with the show. They actually made another show canon a couple weeks ago. Can I tell you what show it was? Is it a spoiler?
Go ahead.
Green Lantern, the animated series.
Nice. Good,
Green
because
Lantern,
I love
the
that
animated
series
is now canon in
the
Young Justice world.
Because that series was so good, and I was so sad that it never got a real...
So you are going to love what you see. You see one of the 4 major characters return, and the developments with that character you will absolutely love. And just Young Justice weaving... milestone lore and Justice Society and Legion and Atlantis. I mean, it knows that there's a big sandbox that they can play in, and they don't care where they grab stuff from as long as it works for the narrative. So that's good. Still going. Superman and Lois.
And Harley Quinn will be coming out for a 3rd season sometime soon, and also Kite Man.
Yep,
and Titans as well for season 4. Kite Man will be getting an animated spin-off series for HBO Max, which who saw that coming?
But one that won't be coming though, because of the changes that we have with the Discovery Warner merger, is the announced out of nowhere Wonder Twins film for HBO Max, which was supposed to start shooting next month.
Which just got like both of the main roles announced, like the casting announced, like just 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, and
3 weeks ago.
Now this is not happening, and something
canceled.
We're not moving from. But you're going to see a lot of that with, and I'm sure that some of those decision-making issues that are, that are on the desks of the new Discovery Warner executives. The CW was part of that as well. So
cutting money. It's just they've got to save money somewhere, and Discovery has a history of unscripted reality TV that is, we all know, is dirt cheap to make. So they're gonna go with their strengths. They're going to hopefully make use of the giant catalogs of IP that Warner brings to them, and make dramatic or scripted TV. But my fear is they're gonna shove more Magnolia in our face. Magnolia House or whatever the Home Improvement Channel crap to
yeah,
us.
but I think they're savvy enough to know that stuff doesn't work on terrestrial television, and I don't think I do think Discovery is going to be a major, much more of a component than say National Geographic is on Disney Plus, but I don't think they're going to shit where they eat their dinner. There's still a lot that Warner consistently brings to the table, and
they do want to reboot and have
catalog. My God, what a catalog.
And they
Jesus,
definitely. I mean, they do want to do like a new, they really want to retool what they're doing with DC films. Hopefully, they go with what's working, which is what James Gunn has been putting out. On the more adult side,
they're also looking at things, and more than likely, Batgirl and Blue Beetle that were initially projects for HBO Max are now going to be theatrical. So, but there's going to be a lot of changes and a lot of shifting, and I'm certain there's going to be delays with some things. I don't think of the stuff that's in the can, since they actually moved some movies up from a later position. So anything I think that's been announced and is either in an advanced stage of pre-production, I don't think we have to concern ourselves with. And,
hopefully not.
Another thing is they've been very prominently discussing issues with DC as IP, and one of the Discovery Warner's execs seems to be dedicated to making it one world. And I mean, can you imagine a comic book world that ties into what you see on film? Star Wars does it. It's a smaller scope, but could happen. So.
I mean, and that's just because Disney has such tight control on it. But it does work. It all ties together, and it would be interesting to have that also for DC. I don't know if it can work. It's just so much there, but you never know. But then, of course, now we've got the really sad news. So
So if you follow comics and comic history, you know that earlier this week, Neil Adams, legendary artist, legendary campaigner for creator rights, passed away from the complications with sepsis. He'd been ill for some time, and he had a very frank interview at the beginning of the year about how problematic 2021 was for him on a health front, and seemed to be doing better. And how old was he? 81 or so?
I think he was just 80. Isn't
that amazing? Like, you consider 80 young now?
A spring chicken, really?
Because I'm like thinking when I was a kid, and when I was about 10 years old, Fred Astaire died, and Fred Astaire was 77, and the news was like, well, he made it to 77, and now you'd be like, well, he may have been able to squeeze out another 10, 13 years there, hey, by the time I hit it, which is closer than I'm comfortable with, I hope, if you want to make me bionic and I'm 115, as long as I'm not like laying in my own filth, I'm okay with that. They're not taking me with that fight. But it does seem, it seems like it's a younger age than it was. Let's put it that way, for passing. So, but led a very good life. A very controversial,
very prolific.
A very controversial figure. I mean, some stuff that came out of his brain was batshit crazy. If you ever if you ever look into some of the things he had proposed about the expanding Earth, not the hollow Earth, but the expanding Earth theory, which he eventually did down the road kind of push to the side and reject some of that stuff. But he had that conspiratorial brain too. But and was also sometimes a very controversial figure, even at conventions. If you ever saw his booth setups, they were like sometimes half the floor. But it's because of him more than anybody else. I'm convinced that you do see Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster on everything.
Yeah.
There's a lot that he did, and with so many classic runs, particularly with Denny O'Neil, with Batman and with Green Lantern, Green Arrow in the '70s, and even with Marvel runs on X-Men and the Avengers with the Kree Skrull War. I mean, there's so much he did. And the adage when I was growing up, it was a quote from him that I think a lot of people adapted, was, "If superheroes really existed, they would look like I drew them." And
interesting.
For a long time, that was the word, until I guess the first person that probably challenged that was Alex Ross. Of something that was a bit more photorealistic, but very often, like the way I conceive of certain characters, my Batman is still drawn by Neil Adams in my head. That's what he looks like. So, and through conventions and particularly with my involvement with the Garden State Comic Fest, I was able to be introduced to him without standing on a line, and I'm glad I did, because his artwork really meant a lot to me growing up.
Yeah. So. I think for me, Neil Adams was kind of because when I was reading comics, it was the new guard of artists, especially the Marvel ones, that were kind of crowding the field in terms of the attention that they were getting. So, you had the Eric Larsons, you had the Jim Lees, you had the
Image Founders.
The Image Founders, basically Rob Liefeld. Like that was what was really huge, and then Neil Adams and some of the other like older artists were kind of were part of that.
Yeah, but even Adams was trying to get into that business with continuity comics, and let me tell you, if you're ever looking for
Mystic,
polybagged with a card, go to your 50-cent bins and you'll find something from continuity comics to this day.
Oh yeah, that's how I found my continuity comics issues and Eclipse issues. Those from that era. We did have a quick comment here from David. Robo Bill sounds like a good comic, to be honest. Could be. Well, so Bill, you kind of asked me to look up some classic, or maybe not so classic and well-known, Neil Adams covers, and just kind of, show our audience, for the people who are watching on YouTube or Facebook or Twitch, some examples of Neil Adams' work that maybe they might not be super familiar with. But what I want to do first is... I don't even know
what's coming, apart from one of them. I haven't what's coming, so this will be interesting for me.
So one of the things I wanted to bring up was, the one that I think most people think is Neil Adams' first Detective Comics, first Batman cover. And that is this one here, except there is a little asterisk here. Carmine Infantino actually drew this. He penciled it, and Neil Adams did the inks. But technically, this is his first Batman cover. Yeah. However, if you want to see his actual real first Detective Comics Batman cover, like Detective Comics Batman cover, it is the one that came a little bit afterwards. I think 2 issues later. This one here, number 372. This is the one that he did himself. So this is his cover, pencils, inks, etc.
And one thing I love about this is probably the tail end of the Batman TV series, and even a few months prior to this, there may have been a Boff and a Pow, and
Yeah.
here you don't have that at all. You know,
No, but you do have the fearsome
he's
Foo
getting,
Fighters. I mean, Food Fighters.
he's getting his ass kicked here.
Well, he's getting his head
Without
kicked,
without
his
the
groin
damn
kicked,
bath
and his
bomb.
feet kicked.
Yeah.
But I thought these were kind of interesting. So this is kind of where he started with Batman.
Yeah.
Now, you know, these are really cool. But he was also working a lot on at the time, Strange Adventures.
Was right after Infantino with Deadman. He I think Infantino maybe did the first issue, and then
Yep.
Adams took over the art chores. It's
Now this
beautiful
one
cover.
you see right here.
Look at those
yeah.
faces. Oof.
Yeah. And this one actually, I think, won an award, you know, just for the quality of the work and how interesting it was. And it's beautiful. I'm not a big Deadman fan, but I want to read this.
Yeah.
I want to, I see this cover. I want to read this.
And look
this
at the
book.
musculature on Deadman. I mean, that's, you know, it's not a He-Man proportions. It's a very well weight trained acrobat, and he just has it right. Yeah.
And I do have another one here, kind of from the earlier era.
This
Batman
this
241.
particular image was used in a lot of licensing in the 70s. You would see this on T-shirts, and I think I had like a plate where this was, you know, like a plate or a cup. Yeah, the 70s license work, you'd see like a lot of art from Neil Adams, a lot of art from Kurt Swan, a lot of art from Murphy Anderson. This image is probably more famous for the Batman pose than the actual issue. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea. Mary MacGuffin. That sounds like a real winner of a character right there, getting apparently.
Well, it's literally
at dawn she will
MacGuffin,
die.
you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So who cares what's in the issue? But look at Batman on the cover. And let's see if this one might tickle your fancy here. This is kind of in the 70s. So this is early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. I could probably tell you, 1971 for this one.
Yeah.
Classic cover. But
how could you, even if you weren't like into Hot Wheels, how would you not want to at least open this comic and see what the hell was going on in this book?
I mean, it's wild for one. This is kind of one of the things that I do like about Neil Adams. I mean, I have no idea what's going on in this comic. I'm probably, you know, as a comic reader, I'm probably not waiting for the next issue of Hot Wheels. But Bill, maybe you did.
Issue.
This was the last issue, but this is wild. This is fantastic. You know, art. You've got like an angry Santa with a Hot Wheels style, you know, sleigh, about ready to murder this couple here.
And just on top of it, look, she's got a splint on. There's dropped Red Cross
gauze and
items there. So this dude's probably trying to save her, and now he's got to deal with the Santa with this. Like, oh, this is amazing.
I just love this cover. I thought you would get a kick out of this one.
I do.
Also, you know, he also did some work for Marvel. So it wasn't just DC that he was doing with. I think he got his start in Archie comics, doing, you know, interiors and Archies.
I mean, I think the first thing that he really did was the Ben Casey comic strip. That was kind of where he got his foot in the door. And, you know, other places started noticing him. But then with Archie, he would do like half-page jokes, not in his own style, in the Archie style. But X-Men is probably his lengthiest run. And on top of this, just apart from the run, you'll see these outfits are a little more exciting than what they were in before. With the, you know, I do like the you can do a lot with a uniform image. These are all his designs, apart from Iceman. These are all his designs, and I love There's two different outfits that he used for Angel, and I love both of them. I just love the color scheme.
Yeah, and this is X-Men or Uncanny X-Men number 56, which was from 1969. So this is a 1969 issue here. And yeah, I mean, you're right. Like in terms of like iconic costumes here, Miss Marvel or Marvel Girl here, Jean Grey with the sort of like that weird mini skirt onesie kind of thing, and also Cyclops. Like this is probably one of his most recognizable costumes because he had this for a couple decades.
Yeah, variations of this costume stick around. When Dave Cockrum did his designs, there wasn't much change apart from the visor.
No, yeah, I mean that's sort of like the blue dominant with the yellow trunks, which again probably the most reminiscent out of all of the other costumes, most reminiscent of the original like Stanley Kirby costumes. Where they were just ill-fitting, like I don't know, jumpsuits or something. But this definitely was a really cool image. Cool cover.
Here is a trivia question for you.
Sure.
You see that X-Men logo? Another famous artist designed that logo. Do you know who did that?
No.
Jim Steranko.
No. That was Steranko's.
Steranko designed that X-Men, and that sure had legs.
I mean, it still does. I mean, that is.
So.
Yeah, I mean, the original logo was like, it looked like two pieces of torn tape in the shape of an X, and then like men. Yeah, nothing too exciting there. So let's see. Let's jump to something a little bit less conventional.
Okay.
Hot Stuff number 8 from 1978.
Yeah.
So very indie-ish. I don't remember the publisher on this one.
Yeah, it was like Eclipse or one of those early indies.
Yeah,
I believe. And he did do work for he did work for Warren. He did work for the very short-lived Atlas Comics, which was basically formed to compete with Marvel. So he did do some independent work prior to setting up his own shop. And also during the 70s, he and Dick Giordano ran a very, at least for a time, very successful advertising company called Continuity Associates. And they would very often use comic book people in there.
I mean, it's just this I think was something I think was a little unexpected for me, because I wasn't very familiar with any of his indie work prior to the 80s. So this was like, what is this? What am I looking at here? It's definitely, it's got a horror vibe to it. This, there's some kind of mid-transformation that's happening with this convict that's, being attacked. But obviously he's not a stranger to horror. And in fact, he had been doing horror for quite some time, by the time that he did this one. And for John, John Runyon, if you're watching, we've got this one here, which I think you're probably going to be very interested in picking up, Mr. Runyon. This was also a Neil Adams cover for The Tomb of Dracula. He actually, I think, redid this a couple years ago. They reissued sort of like a collection, an omnibus or something, collection of Tomb of Dracula, and he redid this image. But I mean, this is the original right here. It's pretty, like, maybe not too like, gruesome, but he gets that gothic sort of feel, that very much like something like a Christopher Lee or Hammer type look to it. It's pretty cool. Let's see if I can find something else real quick. I think we have time for like one more. And I know this was the one that started the conversation today.
Yeah, because I have a print of this signed by Neil. So that's
excellent.
One of the main reasons I wanted to talk about this. The story is actually not an original story in Action Comics. In this particular issue, it reprints Superman, I want to say 233, which was, as you can tell here, was when they did something to Kryptonite and it no longer was a problem for him for a short period of time. My favorite period of Neil Simon Neil Simon. Neil Adams covers is the late 70s with DC when he returned for Superman versus Muhammad Ali, and
Right.
did a
Yeah.
number of covers during uh, about like a 4.5, 5 year period, and I think that's his best work. Didn't do hardly any interiors apart from Superman Muhammad Ali, but there's certain covers that are just amazing. The 5-star superhero spectacular cover. There's another Superman cover from this time from the Superman title where he has a look and he's forming a fist, and you get the sense Superman is about to kill someone. There's some really good covers. Excellent House of Mystery covers when that was a $1 book. There's and if you go to the Comic Book Bears podcast Facebook page, I know I did it in my own page. I know I reshared it. I put together a gallery of all of those covers from this particular period from the late 70s, and so you can see that. And I think it's a separate gallery. If you just go to photos, you can see all of them that I put together. That's my favorite. That's my favorite period of his work. Is those particular covers, because if the purpose of a cover is more than anything is to sell the comic, how does something like this not? I mean, Jesus.
Well, I mean, Jim Lee essentially homaged this for, to use that ridiculous word, for Superman Unchained when he was doing that that miniseries like that. This was probably what he was referencing when he was doing that, because it's very, very similar in the style, the feel, just the power of this type of image.
Yeah.
I'll do something really, really quick, because I thought that this was kind of funny. And you had mentioned Neil Adams was also instrumental, the look for Green Lantern / Green Arrow for that team up book. And one of his images was super iconic, one of those covers. And recently he revisited it in a sort of a parody version for a variant with Superman and Batman looking at Robin going, "My partners are..." basically reprising the Green Lantern, Green Arrow role with Robin standing in for he wasn't Arsenal at the time, but...
the issue of Green Lantern, Green Arrow that this is based on, where it was Speedy who was shooting up on the cover. My parents got that for me for my 12th birthday.
Aww.
They didn't want me to...
Don't do drugs, kid. Don't do drugs. Yeah. But yeah, I just thought this was really interesting. And in recent years he has been doing sort of like these self-referential variant covers, which is pretty cool. And I did have one I wanted to throw in here for Caleb when if Caleb watches this back. Conan the Barbarian #11 variant cover. I mean, here you go. Perfect image of Conan. Yeah. Perfect action.
My biggest problem with Conan, as I've said to Caleb, is it feels like there's 4 or 5 stories and they're just constantly repeated. And there is a book.
Well, hold on here, Joseph Campbell.
There's a Conan story that was initially put out as one of those book and record sets, where they would have an audio adventure, and it was eventually reprinted in the Conan comic proper that's drawn by Neil Adams. And for me, that's my favorite Conan story, because it veers away from the 5 main stories, Conan versus a marauding tribe, or Conan versus a sorcerer, it does something different, and it's done in one story too, and that's my favorite Conan story. The property I'm not crazy about. So whatever that's worth. So
awesome. Well, yeah, I had fun actually looking up some of these, because I wanted to get some obscure ones and some interesting ones that I thought showed that he did have a sense of humor, and he did have an understanding of what his work does and how his work presents the book, the characters, even if the story itself may not be great, you still want to read it based on that cover that he's put out there. So,
all right, we've been at this almost an hour, and we haven't even touched the books we're talking about yet. So, I think it's high time we did that. So, Steve, why don't you talk about the book that we are both going to go in depth with, which is The Murder Book by Hilary
Murder book.
Fitzgerald Campbell.
Yes. So Hilary Fitzgerald Campbell basically wrote this book for us. So she was like, "What can I do? I know I'm going to write this book for Stephen Bell because." And she's a New Yorker cartoonist. She's a stand-up comedian. But more than everything that we read in this book, she is a murderino. She is a massive fan of true crime and murder. Not a fan of murder, and she does explain this very well. She's not a fan of murder itself. Murder is bad, very, very bad. What happens to victims is terrible. But it's the process, it's the understanding, the investigation, the story, the lessons that come with the true crime narrative. What happens to the victim leading up to the crime. The crime itself, the murder itself, and what the killer, what the perpetrator, did before, during, after, were they caught, how did the people catch, how did the police or the FBI or, internet sleuths, how did they catch that murderer? And it's just really fantastic. And she also goes through a lot of different things that I think are part of the big debate about, is it good to be kind of, obsessed with true crime and murder stories and podcasts and books and TV shows and police procedurals and, forensic files and all of that. I think she does an amazing job of just kind of going through, talking about her, why she's so interested, what were the origins of her interest in true crime. Started as a kid. There was always Law and Order running around, on a TV or every TV on the house, in the house that she grew up in. But also, how the women in her family were just always fascinated with it. When she describes her mother, and her mother does feature very prominently in the book, they have a lot of wonderful conversations. But even her mother's mother, it goes back 2 generations, or maybe even 3 generations, of people just fascinated with true crime and with murder and how to avoid it, what happened, the ins and outs, the details, the investigations, everything. So I loved it. There was so much in this book to laugh at. She's really humorous, very conversational in her dialogue. There's a great section right towards the end with a lot of dialogue, a lot of word bubbles, at a Thanksgiving dinner with her and her family and her extended family, and it just felt like I was sitting in the room. Literally reading that, I was like, I'm sitting in the room listening to these people talk. I could hear it all in my head. Just with the way that she writes, it's very conversational, very easy and accessible. And even if you're not a murderino, I think you'd be reading this going, I get it. I get what she's talking about. I understand. But also one thing that she does very well is she incorporates some of the big stories. Some of the stories that really pulled her in, that are very famous, to really pull her in and kind of show the reader how complex and how much a murderino absorbs when hearing about these things, but then also why they're fascinating. Zodiac Killer, Ted Bundy, and who was the it was the Delaware murder, kidnap and murder of Tom Capano, and the victim who was Anne-Marie Fahey. Anne-Marie Fahey. And that's the thing, Anne-Marie Fahey. So her murder, her disappearance and her murder, and the whole story with that, which I think probably hit a little bit closer to home for you, Bill, because that's in your geography more or less.
Yeah.
Would have been about that time. Yeah. But I loved it. I thought it was just fantastic, and her recounting these stories, her, leading a Murder 101 class with her mother, sort of like virtually. Just fascinating. Just so much fun to read. And the illustrations are just, they're ridiculous and silly. She has a great cartooning style. That just makes me laugh, and, does it without keeping things too serious and too dark, because of course the subjects can get very dark and very serious.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. What'd you think, Bill?
I loved this book for a lot of the same reasons you cited. I loved her style that is almost like doodles at points.
Yeah.
But one thing I thought that was really that touched me was the times that she does get serious about her art is when she's drawing the victims. And that's about the only time she gets serious about the art, particularly Bundy's victims. To reiterate that these were people, and these were lives that were lost. And I love that she explores questions about the true crime explosion and why it's so dominated by women with interest. That it could be because it's almost a form of empowerment. That we're supposed to be afraid of these men because it is mostly men. The serial killers are mostly men. Dispels other rumors that there are no minority serial killers. It touches on a lot of topics. A lot of the points of interest where people started. For many women of her age, it's John Bonet. Where just how much saturation there was. Her going into the dum-dum from Law and Order.
Law and Order
figures very prominently. Nancy Grace figures prominently. The one book that was omitted, though, and she was very comprehensive. And one of my
rules.
favorite,
she talked a lot about and rules.
And just the whole podcast issue, with particularly Serial and My Favorite Murder. The one thing, the one omission, and it wasn't until I was reading this book that I never thought about it too much, was Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, because I do think that that's a murder book that doesn't play out like a murder book, yet it's based around a killing, and I think maybe if the film had more prominence. I actually love the film, but I do think if you read that book and you were a particular fan of some of the characters that weren't presented in the film with the bandwidth that they are in the book, like Joe Odom, you're not going to enjoy the film as much. I actually love the film, but it's not a book that I think people return to much anymore. If you go to Savannah,
it had its time. Like it really did have a period of time.
I was surprised that at its omission there, because she was so comprehensive, and that's something I'd love to talk to Murderinos about. But like you said, it's like very conversational. I'd love to meet her mother. Oh my god, yeah. I would absolutely love to meet her. And I feel like I know her, and I feel like I know the people that lived on her cul-de-sac when. She's talking about hanging out at the one family's particular barbecue, going into the history that this is kind of genetic. The women were the biggest consumers of detective magazines. This is nothing new in a sense, but it is something new because it has been an explosion for the last 10 years. But it also, there's an uncomfortable feeling about this. You're enjoying murder. You're enjoying the stories. And I think mechanisms like this book and My Favorite Murder in particular take that to a level where there is a sense of depowerment in a sense, but that's not exactly. And there are things that are creepy about having interest in this stuff. But, I've gone on Jack the Ripper walking tours. I've been to Lake Berryessa. I wanted to leave the second I got there. It was one of the creepiest feelings I've ever had in my life. It's haunted, and it was a beautiful day. And we weren't even that close to the murder site. We were like maybe half a mile away, but we could see it from where we were. So there's things, and I know, like Zodiac. Oh my
Yeah.
god! I mean, like I know that's my guy,
Yeah.
like that. And I think because there are so many significant ones that are unsolved,
Mm-hmm.
or even ones that are solved, that motivations that some people had are not, fully understood. Uh, that's one of the appeals too. Um, look at look what happened with the what was behind what Patton Oswalt's wife,
Michelle McNamara and the
Michelle
Golden State
McNamara
Killer.
killer, yeah.
Yeah.
um
Which does get a shout out here too, because that came out, I
yeah.
believe, around 2017 was when. But she'd been doing the podcast, her podcast for at least a year, a couple of years actually before that. But that was when her book really hit big.
Yeah.
When it was posthumously published. But yeah, I mean, there's so many great moments in this book that I can
And
relate to, and I think probably
and
a lot of
I also
readers
think
can
for
relate to.
people that are a little turned off by it, by
Yeah,
the notion of I think you get a much better understanding that these are not people that are going to go out and do copycats. There is something different behind the interest.
yeah.
um
And there is, like, there's a lot of, and she does say this a lot. She makes this point where this is more their fascination with the victims and the victims' lives. A lot of it is just, these people could be me.
yeah.
She does talk about that a lot. That there's this kind of worry that, like, and for her as a woman, she's looking at the women who are predominantly the victims in this kind of situation, say that could have been me. This could be me. How does this relate? Does this person, does this victim, how is their life the same as me? And does that, what does that say? And there is a lot of mention, especially earlier in the book, about when she was growing up, the closeness, geographic closeness of a lot of the Zodiac killings. And, growing up in that part of Northern California, being able to kind of say, hey, this happened, one town over, two towns over, in this massive, like, this really scary thing.
Yeah.
Even though this was, we're talking like 20, 30 years, she's conscious of this 20, 30 years after it would have happened, and, it's long past. But, there is something to do, there's something about that sort of geographic similarity, personal,
Yeah.
similarities for the victims. Like, there's a lot of that kind of.
For me, growing up,
Yeah.
I don't know what it was for you, but for me, media was saturated. Local media was saturated with the Son of Sam killings. And there was one of the Son of Sam letters was mailed from Englewood, New Jersey, which was only 4 miles from where we lived, and from where I grew up. And oh my God, school the next day. We had to have an assembly. Son of Sam might be a Bergen County resident.
Wow.
It was nuts.
So for me, interestingly enough, the big, like, where I became really conscious of murder and, like, how much it permeates the media and just people's conversations and just, the conversation period, was the O.J. Simpson situation. Because I was in high school, and they wheeled in the TV into my classroom. Somebody, the teacher actually got the TV, like a TV, so we could watch the verdict being read. Like, that was how much, it was a big part of my high school years. The car chase, the Bronco chase, the glove that didn't fit, and, all sorts of the craziness that went along with that case and the circus of it all. But it was just something that just permeated. Like, people just would not stop talking about it. It was what it was to talk about. When you live through those big events, I think they really put a huge impact on your understanding of, this isn't just like a tiny fascination for some people. This is actually a pretty big fascination for a lot of people. Just some, take that fascination and do a lot more research and reading, or watching or listening.
Yeah.
And she really talks about that a lot here. Which,
What was the thing that you mentioned earlier about your mother with I know my first name is Steven. When that hit,
Yes.
that these events kind of have effects on our lives, whether you recognize it or not immediately. Yeah.
It did, and again, I didn't really care so much about the made for TV miniseries. I know my first name is Steven, or I know my name is Steven. About the kidnapping and sexual abuse. Again, it wasn't murder, but it was kidnapping and severe
It was a true
long-term
crime. It was
sexual abuse. Yes, true crime.
It was a true crime. Murder factors in later.
Yes. Oh, yes, which I didn't really know about until just recently when Hulu put out that really cool series, Captive Audience, that I do recommend. But yeah, I mean, this was something that affected my mother massively because she, as a young mother herself of, young boys, like, this was something that it freaked her out. She was obsessed with it. Like, it was something that she talked about constantly. I couldn't have cared less. But I know that kind of, really affected how she approached how much freedom we had when we were kids. Like, a lot of that, especially in the 80s, it was a big deal about stranger danger, where in the 70s it wasn't so much, which is why all these these kids tend to be abducted constantly during the 70s. Yeah, I mean, in the 80s, she, like a lot of other parents in the U.S., just became obsessed with this idea of, like, well, what if it happens to my kid?
Yeah.
Like,
it's so funny, like thing. In the 70s, like with my parents, as long as they knew what street I was on, it was cool. Not like whose home I was at, like just where I generally was, and they could
general
walk
location
and yell, and I could, they figure out. I even by the 80s, and I think with situations like Adam Walsh and Eton Pates, things started to change. The thing that freaked my mother out, and this was murder, were the Tylenol. The poison Tylenol capsules.
Yes, the poison Tylenol.
Yeah, and I also think because
through My Favorite Murder, I heard about that.
And my mother was a medical technologist, and that was she was so like hyper interested in the new packaging that was going to happen and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So and talk about something that has had an effect on us till this day. We have these safety packaging even on my Powerade Zero. I hear that pop and I'm okay.
Yeah. But it's true.
Yeah. I don't think we're really doing this book justice though, because we're kind of. But I think what we're doing is we're showing how the topics that are central to this book affect our own lives, and that's what she does for Oh my God! Like it's actually like over 300 pages, yet it reads very quickly. It reads very, very quickly. And also I loved that there was things I didn't know about. Crime classics. The radio series from the 50s.
Yes.
I can't wait to listen to this. Where they had reenactments of, that's effectively like on audio unsolved mysteries. I can't wait to listen to this stuff. But, I have to say, any book that compares the predatory nature of the Zodiac killings to dating in New York City, I mean, it's and that you're laughing about it. She does something very special with this book, and I know it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but for certain people where that the subject isn't your cup of tea, this may be a very good way of peering into that world without certain complexities. I absolutely love this book.
Yeah, and she, for people who, again, also kind of go back to one of the things that we mentioned, who think that the whole true crime obsession is new with with podcasts like Serial and My Favorite Murder and Last House on the Left and all these other, or Last Podcast on the Left, I mean, she actually gives you a little timeline about what kind of true crime was hugely popular in each of the decades, and the only thing that's changed is how the media, like how that's consumed, whether it's through pulp magazines, radio, early TV, like TV shows itself, whether they're fictionalized or ripped from the headlines, plus 24-hour news, like everything is just kind of, geared towards, giving us as much information about murder as possible these days. But
And one thing I also love
not a
to
new
take away
obsession.
from the book is one of my favorite films is Zodiac. It's in my top 10. It's firmly in my top 10. And when I came out of that film, I half expected 1981 cars to be parked in the theater lot outside. And she had a very similar experience. That's where she developed this huge affinity for 70s films and for 70s fashion. And
aesthetic.
I would love to talk to her about that, because I didn't have the exact same circumstances, because I lived through it, for part of it. From I would say, like, I have a stream of consistent memory from at least the fall of 1973 on. But that affected me too. It was a film that transported you, and we just had different destinations. But the film did its trick. I'm just loving this book, and I'm debating how soon I'm going to revisit it. This will not be the only time I read this.
No, I'm super happy. I'm now part of the Hilary Fitzgerald Campbell fan club.
And also, people, the Fitzgeralds
there is a connection there.
There is a connection there. So
there is a connection to that famous family. So, but yeah, it's great. I do recommend it again. We both recommend it. It was put out by Andrews McNeill Publishing, so not normally known for graphic novels, but definitely it's available. Whoever find graphic novels are sold. But yeah, no.
And I know we shouldn't be promoting Amazon because they're not good in many ways, but there's a very good price on this right now. If you want.
Well, I got my copy from my local indie bookstore, Bookmarks, in Winston-Salem, so I supported my local business. But I also get a book club discount there too, so maybe not. But yeah, no, I thought this was great, and of course, while I was driving this past weekend to go visit family at the beach, what was I listening the entire 11-hour trip? My Favorite Murder, all the way in the room. So, very, very fun.
It's also interesting because My Favorite Murder, and I think Serial in particular, some of the storytelling narratives have been adopted by non-true crime shows. I really think the way that You Must Remember This has evolved. That almost plays like a true crime show. It's interesting how the narrative devices that some of these shows have employed have had effects. There was another show I recently listened to, the TCM, the Plot Thickens.
Plot Thickens. Okay.
The Lucille Ball episodes. You wouldn't. There was no crime with Lucille Ball, but the way that mysteries and controversies are unravel in their depiction, it's very, very much influenced by some of those programs. So
or also if you're for the ones that have interviews and things like that, Phoebe Judge in Criminal. I'm Phoebe Judge, and this is Criminal. It's just there are certain things certain ways of incorporating interviews and things like that. It's very cool. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Anyway.
All right, I think we got enough time to quickly talk about another book that we dug. So why don't you start with a set of books you want to eliminate?
Well, sticking with the theme of murder and true crime, or in this case, pulp crime, but also because May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, I want to talk about the final arc of The Good Asian, which is an excellent crime pulp detective story set in San Francisco, in the 30s, and it is just it's gory, it's gritty, it's grimy, and it is a difficult read for somebody who doesn't know how politically, systemically racist the U.S. has been against people who were of Asian descent, Chinese immigrants, up to, literally, up till 1965, really, in terms of what they've limited and how they targeted, specifically Chinese immigrants. But The Good Asian is a great narrative about a Hawaiian detective who is of Chinese descent, who comes to San Francisco in search of, is asked to come and look for a Chinese woman named Ivy, who worked for his sort of adopted white rich family, who's gone missing in San Francisco. And while there, he encounters a whole conspiracy, a triad-based, boogeyman, essentially Hui Long, who may or may not be murdering people around Chinatown, and also a very, very personal connection to the murders, to the disappearance, and to the conspiracy that sort of surrounds the whole situation around this woman, Ivy. And along the way, he has a lot of violent interactions, gets hacked at with a butcher knife, gets basically blown up, and severely burned and disfigured in a fire. And in this arc, it's him with a new face, like a lot of pulp detective comics in the 30s. Somebody's disfigured. Oh, now I've got a new face and nobody can recognize me. Trying to figure out and tie up the loose ends and find out where not just he fits in, but also the family that he had made such a strong part of his life, how they fit into the disappearance of this woman. It wraps up that mystery, it wraps up that situation, but really is a wonderful and very damning portrait of the way that white Americans treated Chinatowns as a whole, but also the Chinese people who were just coming to America for a better life, and encountered forced isolation, ghettoization, and just lots and lots of bigotry that led to a lot of these things happening that are talked about in this book. There's a lot of great back matter. If you do pick up The Good Asian, I recommend getting the single issues, because there's a lot of back matter, and I'm not sure it's going to be included in. So
it's like editions. A criminal Brubaker situation where the single
yes.
issues are. Okay.
Single issues, yeah. So it very much like that. There's interviews with the writer, and I'm going to butcher his last name because I believe he is Thai. It's Pichet Shota, and then the artist is Tefengi, last name Tefengi. But it's put out by Image. There's a lot of interviews with him, a lot of interviews with a historian that they worked with in order to get more, factual information to fully flesh out the world of San Francisco Chinatown in the 30s. So it's great. It's a great read, but it'll get you thinking afterwards.
Yeah. All right, I have a book that you don't have to think too hard, which is nice.
Hey,
for these last two, and also last week, 2 weeks ago, we did an all DC episode, so I felt kind of honor bound to hit the House of Ideas. So this is a book, came out in 2014, but I just got it in my greasy little hands this week. The Amazing Spider-Man Family Business. And it's a book I always wanted because it's two of my favorite writers, Mark Waid and James Robinson, that tell this Spider-Man tale with art by Gabriel Del Otto. Gabriel is probably best known for Secret War, if you remember that, with Bendis. He's mostly done covers, and I also found out today that he has he does a lot of calendar work in Italy. The calendars are still a big business in Italy, and he does a lot of art for calendars.
Interesting.
It's almost as profitable as the cover work he does for comic books, and he does full painting illustrations. So from that particular school, and look at this Spider-Man. Just look at that. Look at that. Isn't
that's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's some gorgeous art in here, and so anyway, what the story is you can tell on the front cover it's Spider-Man versus the Kingpin. Family Business isn't just a reference to the Kingpin and the Mafia and all that stuff. The family business that Peter Parker's parents were involved in was espionage. This goes back to the 60s, and Richard Parker and, oh God, I can't remember the wife's name, um, uh, and Mrs. Parker. They,
Mrs. Barker.
were agents of Shield and some other real life agencies like the CIA. They mentioned in the book that they saved the world single-handedly twice. Um, some nice images that they have of them fighting AIM and Hydra, and it's really cool. So that's the background about family business. So where we see with Spider-Man is through a series of events. He finds initially he thinks it's because he failed to get to the local delicatessen to pay his Con Ed bill on time. So it's classic Peter Parker. Even when he has the money, he screws up. Um, that there's this like almost paramilitary organization that's invading his apartment, and he gets out of it, but he gets out of it with the help of a woman named Teresa, who introduces herself as his sister, and that it's her understanding, and it's her recent understanding, that she was born after Peter to his parents while they were in some other location, while Peter was left with Aunt May and Uncle Ben. So all this time, it's possible Peter has had a sister he doesn't know about, and it turns out the sister went into the family business as a spy. There's some wonderful James Bond references. The action goes from New York to Monte Carlo, then over to Switzerland. Then it's an international story, yet it's still a Spider-Man story. What the Kingpin is involved in is he's after uh, a cache of gold that Parker, not Spider-Man, but that Peter Parker factors into because of his DNA. That sounds like crazy comic booky. It is crazy comic booky, but it works really well. You have minor villains that play major roles in this. Mentalo and Cyclone. Yeah, what was that noise, Steve? I was just wondering, just for people.
Oh, which noise?
That noise.
Oh, that's the AC probably.
Oh, okay, because it's been going
Yeah.
on and off. I'll just put a disclaimer when we put the audio episode on.
Yeah.
But we're happy just to have audio. We had some problems earlier. Background, but for a story that ties Spider-Man, spies, the Kingpin, B-list villains, and Nazi sleeper robots. I mean, this does it in less than 100 pages, and it does it well. One of the reasons I got this recently was I found this at Five Below for that kind of store. Is $5. Everything there is $5 or below, and the list price was $24.99, which is probably why I didn't get it when it first came out. And you remember?
I mean, it's hardcover.
Yeah, you'll remember that there was this period where both DC and Marvel were experimenting with the original graphic novel, and DC had a bigger success with their Earth 1 line. Marvel had Season 1, and then had a few in this particular series. There was Endless Winter for the Avengers, and there's actually an ad for that in here. Line didn't take off, I think, because of the very high price point for fairly low page count, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful shelf porn, and maybe you'll get lucky at a Five Below too. I do recommend this, particularly at this price. So that was the second book I wanted to talk about.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this episode up. And when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. And the bear community, if you find a fellow attractive, you woof at him. And we do something very similar. We woof at a project that may be a TV program or a film or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, or in this case, viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
So I was kind of waffling on this one because there's, of course, a very big new TV series, big for geeky sci-fi nerds, that just came out today, Thursday, May 5th. But I think I'm going to rewind it and actually give a recommendation for a film that I watched this past week called The Northman. It basically, the easiest way I can tell this, the elevator pitch style, it's Conan, but with Vikings mixed with Hamlet. There is all sorts of blood. There's Bjork as a fortune-telling witch. There's if you're a Skyrim fan, there's a large draugr that the Northman has, that Amleth/Hamlet has to defeat. But also there is a naked sword fight in a volcano. 'Cause why not? Because why wouldn't there be? Why wouldn't there be? That's the question, and you don't have to worry about not having the answer because there is one in this movie. So if you are in the mood for a lot of gore, blood, and things being driven into people's faces, see this movie, The Northman. It is, it's wild.
Okay. I also went in with the intention of talking about the big franchise show that started today. I will say it is the most Star Trekiest Star Trek that has trekked in a long time, and I loved it, and maybe we'll do something more with that as we have more episodes in the can. Loved it. Yeah. I loved it. I'm going to watch it again tomorrow. I loved it. But I'm going to reference something else that I watched because it's a farewell, and I did binge the last 12 episodes of Grace and Frankie, the comedy series that stars Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin and Martin Sheen and Sam Waterston. Been 7 seasons of a very well written, very well conceived show. Particularly Brianna, I'm gonna miss the hell out of you. This is one of my favorite TV characters of all time. And there were many moments where, Rob and I watching it in bed were just cracking up, and that they were able to do that after, 7 years is a good stretch. And I'm really glad, because of the advanced ages of the performers, that they were able to finish the story the way they wanted to finish it. And you have, in the last episode, one hell of a cameo. Let's put it that way. And if you know those 2 actresses, you know that there's another performer who also had big news this week that factors in. So, yeah. Okay. Without saying, can say something without saying it. Look what you did there, Xanos. So, Grace and Frankie, the final 12 episodes, they released 6 episodes that were prepared just as the pandemic hit, and they were able to, through ADR, able to finish those. But when they did reconvene shooting last year, they were able to finish 12 more. So it's actually a 16-episode final season. And just, this is definitely the coda. This is the finish. But if you've never watched the show before, and don't be turned off. It's not an old lady show. It's really, really sharp wit, and sharp wit throughout, and wonderful characters. And I'm really glad that exists. Something Netflix did right. Okay, let's there was a little Netflix bashing earlier on, and they did. This was a show that they did let organically grow. Didn't give it a huge push, but it still got noticed when it first was released, and it's great. And you're gonna laugh. There's something there that'll make you laugh. So, Grace and Frankie.
Which is awesome. Yeah, my husband's been a huge fan since the first episode, and every time that they drop a season, usually it takes within a day. He's binged the entire thing. I think this time it took him like 2 days because he was busy planting stuff. Like,
we were gonna do it in 4. We ended up doing it in 3 just because we were like, oh, what's one more episode, you know? And plus,
yeah.
but we also did want to savor it a little bit, but it's the kind of show that if it's just reeling after the first one, you don't,
You don't turn
you
on.
don't stop. You just what the hell? Let's go through another one. So
That was like with us in Heartstopper, the first season of Heartstopper that just came out, which Caleb has been singing the praises of the comic for quite some time. The TV series was absolutely worth it. It was wonderful and sweet, very cute, very. Yeah.
All right.
Anyway.
Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to listen to us, please do so by downloading or listening to us through Apple Podcasts, listening to us through Stitcher Radio, or many of the other podcatching platforms. And if you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. If you were watching our live stream, thank you for joining and staying with us through this 90 plus minutes. We did pretty good, Steve. We're at 95 minutes. Not too bad.
95 minutes.
We can go on. We understand that. And if you are watching us delayed on YouTube, please follow and please leave a comment. We would greatly appreciate it. So until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
And I'm Steve Morey.
You're going to hear a woof and an explosion. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Take care, everyone.